Hello everyone, welcome. I'm going to give everyone a minute or two before we start. We're going to be making sweet potato breakfast cookies today, and who doesn't want a cookie for breakfast? So stay tuned, I'll be right back and then we'll get started. All right, so I see some people coming on. I was just gonna wait like another 30 seconds, minute for everybody to come on. My name is Jessica Malazzo. I'm a certified integrative nutrition health coach. I do a lot of healthy cooking demonstrations through Mastic Marich's library and other libraries. So thank you for joining me tonight. We're making sweet potato breakfast cookies, and who doesn't want to eat a cookie for breakfast? You could also eat it for snack or of course a dessert as well. The recipe will be posted underneath this video after in the comments section, so you don't have to write down all of the ingredients and the measurements and all of that stuff. So I will give that to you in the comments right after this. So stay tuned. I'm usually within 5 to 10 minutes I post it, and then hopefully you'll make it at a later date. These are really super easy cookies. You only need a few ingredients. So we're using oats. I have sprouted oats here, so you can use gluten-free oats if you are gluten-free. So these cookies are going to be gluten-free. They also are vegan, so there's no eggs in it, and that's pretty much it. We're using the oats. So these I actually found at Costco. They're sprouted. They're gluten-free oats. Oats are technically gluten-free, but sometimes they're made in a facility that processes wheats, and that's why if you do have an allergy, you want to make sure that it does say gluten-free. So these are also sprouted, which anything sprouted, any type of grain or oats sprouted is said to be more easier to digest. So those I found at Costco, but whatever oats you have, you could use. You just want to make sure that they're not quick oats. You just want old-fashioned oats. Our next ingredient is going to be almond flour. You could also use almond meal. So I'm using a super fine almond meal. Again, I don't have the package, but this is from Costco. So a lot of these ingredients you can get at Costco or BJ's, which makes it less expensive to make. You're buying in bulk, which is really great. So hopefully a lot of these ingredients you already have in your house. We're then using spices. So I have cinnamon, I have ginger, and then we're using some vanilla extract. Our sweetener is going to be maple syrup. That's the only sweetener in here that's added sugar. The other sugar comes from raisins, or you could also use chocolate chips, which we'll be talking about after. And then too, if anybody has any comments or questions, feel free to drop them here. I try to go through them as I go through the live. But if I miss anything, I always go back and double check them. So if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to ask. We're using sea salt. You could always use like a pink Himalayan salt if you are watching your salt. And then baking powder. And then the squash. So these are sweet potato cookies. But the best part is you could really use whatever type of squash you have on hand. So you could supplement pumpkin. You could also do, I have some leftover butternut squash that I roasted in the oven the other day. So again, if you want to roast your sweet potatoes or your squash in the oven, that's wonderful. And if you don't, you could buy canned. So this recipe, you could use canned sweet potatoes or squash, or you could use leftovers if you roasted a butternut squash in the oven or a sweet potato in the oven. You just want to make sure to mash it up with a fork, or you could puree it obviously in a blender if you wanted to, but definitely not necessary. And we have some coconut oil. So let's get started. The oven's going to be at 350. These do take a little longer in the oven. They're quite large cookies. I'm going to show you what they look like after, but I do them all in one bowl. So usually recipes call for 2 bowls. This recipe even originally called for 2 bowls. If you could use one, why not? Less to clean, easier to make. So we're gonna start with the oats. I always start with my dry ingredients here, and then I'll add in the wet ingredients. So we're doing 3 cups of oats. The oats are great for fiber. Also the butternut squash or the sweet potato, that is great for fiber as well. Only too big. So we're doing 3 cups. And again, I'm going to be posting this recipe right after the live, so don't feel that you have to write it down. 1.5. Whoops. All right, and that's about 3. And then we're doing almond flour. Again, you could use almond meal, which almond meal is more coarse. It's not as fine. But use whatever you could find in the store. So I just have regular almond flour. Again, this is naturally gluten-free. It's just ground up almonds. And we're going to use, I'm going to use a knife. So it's a cup of almond flour. But you're getting some protein in here. Again, some added fiber, healthy fats. So we call these breakfast cookies because they really are quite healthy, depending on what, your term of healthy looks like and if you have any restrictions. But really, we're using whole ingredients. These have a lot of fiber. We're adding in the vegetable from sweet potatoes or butternut squash. You could even add in some shredded carrot or shredded zucchini in here to get in some additional vegetables. So it's just a great snack or breakfast or whatever you want it to be, especially if you're on the run and you don't have time to eat. These you could also make ahead of time. You could keep them in the fridge or the freezer, and this way you kind of always have on hand. You could bake them off as needed if you wanted to, so you didn't have to make them all at once. Sometimes I like to just mold them and then I'll place them in the freezer and then put them in a Ziploc bag. So they're already ready to be baked off. And this way you don't have to worry about eating all of them. So we're gonna add in our spices. We're doing 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, and then we're gonna do a teaspoon of ground ginger. You could also use fresh ginger if you really wanted to. That's another great option. You could also use pumpkin spice if you prefer. So I like these because they're quite versatile. You could really use what you have on hand, and then also the spices that you like, but cinnamon and ginger we're gonna do today. Gives it a nice flavor. So we're gonna do 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then we're gonna do half a teaspoon of sea salt and half a teaspoon of baking powder. These really aren't gonna rise. They're quite thick cookies. They really don't spread out, but I like that. It's more dense. And for me, they're quite filling. I made some last night so you guys could see what they look like today. And I added in a healthier chocolate chip. So again, a great dessert. And you don't feel as guilty since there's butternut squash in there or sweet potato. All right, so you want to make sure that we're going to mix this really well, and then we're going to add in our wet ingredients. You could even probably try this with banana. I mean, that would be a much different cookie because you'd be using banana instead of a sweet potato or butternut squash. And it would more be like a banana oatmeal cookie. So you can see it's nicely mixed. Another option with the recipe says too is that you could pulse your oats. So you could create almost like an oat flour so there's less texture. These are similar to an oatmeal raisin cookie where you're having the full oat. So there's a lot of density to it. Some chewiness, and for me it's more filling and satisfying. Or you could grind up your oats or some of your oats, maybe half the amount, and put them into a flour, so this way it's a finer batter. So really whatever you prefer. And then like I said, next we're gonna do our puree. You could use it canned. You just want to make sure that there's no added ingredients. So here we have organic sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. I try to keep these cans on hand if you could see. This way, I mean, the shelf life is really long. You always have them on hand. It's great for baking cookies like this or loaves, or what else could you do it? You can make a sweet potato pudding. So there's a lot of uses that you could do. Or like I said, say you have squash, especially now it's winter, but maybe you had some fall squash left over, and squash does really stay well, especially if you store it properly. So maybe you have some squash like butternut or acorn. You wouldn't use a spaghetti squash, but any type of acorn squash, butternut squash, you can definitely use. And you can see here, I baked my squash whole. So it's gonna take about 40 minutes or so in the oven. And you just wanna make sure that you're going to mix it up again with your fork. I wanna make sure that you guys can see. This is also a great way if someone in your family doesn't particularly care for squash or vegetables, to get them into their diet, because in my opinion, you can't really tell that there's necessarily squash. I mean, squash and sweet potatoes do have a sweetness to them, which I like, but it's balanced out with the almond flour and the oats and the cinnamon. And then of course we're adding in some maple syrup. So we're doing a cup of this. Again, if you have kids, this is a great recipe to make for them, especially if you want to get some more fiber into their diet, and then also you're getting nutrients. And they won't even know that it's squash. And I had, to give you reference, I had baked 2 small butternut squashes. They were probably like maybe that big, and this yielded at least 2 cups. So something for you to know, that if you, even if you got a small butternut squash, that would be plenty for this recipe. Just adding that all in there. You're just going to want to make sure that this is well mixed. When we add in our maple syrup and also our coconut oil, that helps it all combine. And then we could also mash it with a fork so it's well combined as well. All right, so we're just going to... So now the coconut oil, you want to make sure that it's liquid. So if you live in New York, probably everyone's from New York, we're using unrefined organic coconut oil. Again, this is another Costco find. You want to make sure that, you know, if you can get organic and unrefined, that would be better. This is very solid in the winter months unless your house is super hot. So you just want to make sure that you melt it. You could melt it on the stovetop. You could also melt it in the microwave. So that's what I did tonight. Really easy. We're doing a 1/2 cup. So you could just put it in the microwave. And we're going to drizzle this in. And then again, I'm using pure maple syrup from Costco again. So we're doing a 1/2 cup. If you're watching your sugar, you could even try, say, a 1/4 cup. It really depends on, you know, say you're watching your sugar levels, or you could of course use honey if you wanted in this as well, or an agave. I love the maple syrup. I love the flavoring. All right, and then we're gonna add in a teaspoon of vanilla extract. That's it. So really simple. Again, I did this all in one bowl. So, you know, why waste 2 bowls and have to do more work for yourself? So I love to make healthy meals. that are easy and delicious, but also healthy for you. So, you know, all of us tend to be very busy and we don't have a lot of time maybe in the kitchen. So these are definitely quick to make. Also, if you missed any of the other cooking demonstrations, I've been doing cooking demonstrations on here for, oh my God, I think it's almost going to be a year now. So make sure to check them out. You could go back and watch every video. If you don't want to watch the video, all the recipes are posted, so you don't have to watch the video if you don't want to. But we've made a lot of great things. I think the next class is going to be a baked falafel with quinoa and a cilantro sauce. So again, we want to use things that you have in your cupboard or your pantry, your pantry. So this way you don't have to go and buy everything. All right, so that's nicely mixed. You could see that it's quite thick. It's going to be a very thick batter, and that's what we want. Again, at this point, if you wanted to add in any shredded zucchini or shredded carrots, you could do so as well. And now is the fun part. So you really could add in what you enjoy. This recipe originally calls for raisins because it's a breakfast cookie. Raisins, of course, have natural sugars, but there's no added sugar to them. You want to make sure that, of course, you're getting organic. So there's, again, just organic raisins. So Sunmade makes organic. There's ingredients, organic raisins. So you just want to be careful for dried fruit, because if you are using dried fruit at home, some dried fruit actually adds additional sugar, and that's what you want to avoid. Dried fruit is sweet already, and you definitely want to make sure that you're not overeating dried fruit, but you also want to make sure that there's no added sugar in your dried fruit, because that's really unnecessary. Dried fruit is going to be much sweeter most of the time than a fresh piece of fruit, since it's concentrated. So I got these raisins. Another option would be if you wanted to make these into a dessert and add in some chocolate chips. So that's another great option. Or you could mix both. You could do raisins and chocolate chips. These are one of my favorite chocolate chips. Again, this brand is actually very expensive if you bought it at Whole Foods or another health food store, but Costco actually had these. So they're called Hue Gems. They are quite delicious, but they're sweetened with coconut sugar. So again, you know, looking for ingredients that have real foods as the ingredients. We want to avoid artificial sweeteners and flavors, and even natural flavors, because natural flavors are actually created in a lab. So read your ingredient labels. You want to make sure that you're getting you know, the healthiest ingredients as you can. And you could also do 100% cacao chips. So Trader Joe's has them now, and you probably will be able to find them at health food stores. So if you buy 100% cacao, that is going to be no added sugar. So it's a great option as well. For me, when you bake with it, it's not so bitter because it's balancing out with the maple syrup. So we're going to do raisins tonight. We're going to do a half a cup. And you could even put, you know, if you wanted to chop up some nuts in here, you could do, maybe you want to do goji berries. I have not tried, but I think even if you did fresh blueberries might work as well. So you can make these a little different each week. Maybe you even want some shredded coconut. So I always tell people, get creative, use what you have in the house, but also make it exciting and something that you want to do. Most people don't have the time for cooking, or maybe don't love cooking. I always encourage people to put on a podcast or music and try to make it a relaxing time. So again, we're going to add in, I added in a half a cup of these raisins because the ones that I made last night have chocolate chips. So it's going to be similar to an oatmeal raisin cookie, but we have our sweet potato in here, or in this case, we have some butternut squash. This is gonna make about 12 big cookies. So we're gonna get just a piece of squash in here that's stringy. Get that out. You can see the color, if you can see the color, and you'll see the cookies are quite nice. They're orange, so they're quite beautiful and appealing to the eye. All right, so there we go. And no one can even tell that there's sweet potato or squash in here. So for your picky eaters, this is definitely a great option. Now you just need a baking sheet. So we're gonna get a baking sheet. Like I said, it's gonna be 350. It is gonna take, they are gonna take about 20 to 25 minutes depending on the, you know, the heat of your oven. Now you could use parchment here. You can use a baking, those silicone sheets. I've actually been using them and I quite love them because I've been using, or trying to use less oil, where I just have a little leftover coconut oil here that I'm just putting on the sheet, rubbing on the sheet a little bit. This way they don't stick. And again, if, oh, Lily's no sugar added chocolate chips from Stop and Shop. Yeah, so use whatever chocolate chips that you want. Even Stop and Shop, thank you, Phyllis, for telling us. Even Stop and Shop has their own brand, which is Nature's Promise, and they have organic chocolate chips. So they might contain more sugar, and that's the thing. Each brand is going to contain a different amount of sugar. This is for 1/4 cup, only 8 grams of sugar. So that's not bad for 1/4 cup when the entire batter is going to have 1/2 cup. So you're talking about 16 grams of sugar. And then we're dividing it by, if we get 12 cookies, you know, it's a little more than a gram. 1.5 grams of sugar. You know, and in the ideal world, you know, would we love to all sit down and have an amazing breakfast and eat whole foods or maybe oatmeal or whatever it may be, of course. But sometimes we don't have time. So this is a great option to meal prep. I always urge clients to pick one day a week and meal prep, even if it's for an hour or 2 hours. And you'll be surprised that once you get a hang of it, it's actually quite easy. And meal prepping doesn't even mean that you have to make an entire meal. So you could make a large batch of quinoa or rice. You can make a whole bunch of roasted vegetables, and this way you have them in containers for the week. You could clean your lettuce or whatever you want to do, or clean your vegetables. It makes cooking during the week or preparing your dinners much easier. So I want to make sure that you guys can see this. You can see it here. So I have a scooper, which this is a big scooper. I want to say it's probably a little smaller than 1/2 cup. Maybe this is about 1/4 cup. You know, you don't need to go and buy a scooper. You could just use your hands. But it's just to show you that these are quite large cookies. And you could always make them smaller too. I don't know, for me, I just love a big cookie. And we're gonna flatten them out with our hand because again, they're not gonna spread. So I'll be able to fit all of these on the sheet. So I'm just gonna do a few to show you. I mean, I love these scoopers. I feel like they're great for meatballs, cookies. Even I love to use it as a scooper for muffins. So they are quite useful. And then there's much smaller ones. You could do a tablespoon if you wanted to as well. It's just your preference and what you have. And if you don't have the scooper, you could always use 1/3 cup or 1/4 cup to make your nice round. So if I was gonna freeze some of these, I would take a smaller tray because you wanna take a tray that's going to fit in your freezer. So I would take a small tray, something that was gonna fit in my freezer. I would portion these out, put it in the freezer for at least an hour or a couple hours. Once they're frozen solid, then I would put them in a Ziploc bag and label it, of course, with the date, just so I know what it is. But this way I can make them at a later time, or maybe you make a few each week. So it's a great way to meal prep for yourself, or maybe your kids or you want a snack. And this way you have them in the freezer all ready to go. You just have to bake them in the oven. Now you could always bake all of these off and then freeze them after. You could do that as well. So I'm just gonna show you. So you can see they're totally easy. It makes a good amount. Hopefully you have most of these ingredients in your house. If not, they're pretty easily found. I've also found Lidl is pretty good. I don't know if anyone has a Lidl by them. I know they're opening up many from the island. But if you're in the Mastic Merches area, you should have a Lidl right in Center Merches. There might even actually be one in Shirley now. I can't remember. But they do have a small organic section, but they do have an organic section. Or like Phyllis said, Stop and Shop is a good option. I also love, like, if you've never been to Cornucopia, they're in Sayville, so a little further away depending on where you live. But they have monthly sales each month, which you could actually view online first. So there might be some things that maybe you use and you could get them on sale. But it's a cute little health food store, and they also have prepared food in the back. I'm nowhere affiliated with them, but I just shop with them sometimes, and they just have a lot of great things there. So how many did we get so far? 3, 6, 9, 12. So we're gonna get more than 12. I think I got 14 yesterday. So we're almost done. Whoops. And they all fit on one tray. That's what I love, because again, who wants to do any more dishes? Just make one more. So and you could obviously use parchment here too if you want a faster cleanup. So we're gonna put these in the oven, 350. It took about 25 minutes. Again, it's gonna depend on your positioning in the oven and how hot your oven is. Every oven does tend to be a little different. And then before we place these in, we're just gonna flatten them with our palm. You could always use the bottom of a cup if you wanted to, but our hands work just as well. And then I have a little bit here, so I'm just gonna put it on. And voila, super easy. All right, so I'm gonna move these away and I'm gonna show you what they look like. Put them in this fancy little thing for tonight, but this is the finished product, if you could see. So they have a really pretty orange hue to them. It might look a little different depending on what brand of puree you're using, or if you're using sweet potato versus butternut squash, but they really are pretty beautiful. You can see the size of my hand. So, and I have like the size of my palm, I guess. They're about the size. So they're nice cookies, and they're also quite thick. These, again, I use the Hue Gems in them. So great to have as breakfast, a snack, dessert, and just a nice treat to have in the house. So I hope you guys had a wonderful time tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to post this recipe so you can make them yourself. And I hope you'll let me know how you like them. But they're really easy. I hope you could see that they were very easy, not a lot of ingredients, and make them your own. So I'm just gonna read. Okay, someone's just asking. Oh yeah, so go over the dry ingredients. Yeah, of course. So I'm gonna post the recipe, so don't worry. The dry ingredients were almond flour. So I did a cup of almond flour. I did 3 cups of oats. I then did cinnamon, 2 teaspoons. I did ginger, which was a teaspoon. And my other dry ingredient, just salt. Salt and baking powder. So salt was a half a teaspoon, and then baking powder was a half a teaspoon as well. But if you give me 5 minutes, I'm going to go run upstairs on my computer and I will post this recipe. The recipe tells you that you could mix up the oats and do 2 separate bowls, but if you guys watched me, I used 1 bowl. I didn't want to use my food processor and mix up the oats, so we made them in 1 bowl so we don't have to clean it and we don't have to clean the food processor. Again, keep the oats whole, especially if you like that texture of an oatmeal cookie. So thank you so much for joining me. Stay tuned. We're doing a lot of, or I will be doing more cooking demonstrations with the library, so make sure to look at the schedule, and then also you could look at my past videos are all saved in the video section of Facebook. So check them out. Thank you so much for spending your night with me. Thank you, and I will talk to you guys soon. Have a great night, and I can't wait to hear how you like them. Bye-bye.